Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. I hope you'll tune into the first hour. We had a tremendous conversation in which we talked about the USC valedictorian who's being denied the opportunity to speak before her class because they said because of security concerns. Many people saying it's because she's Muslim and she's pro-Palestinian. It's a stirring conversation that we had with If Not Now from Chicago and Dr. Julianne Malveaux, renowned economist, president emeritus of Bennett College for Women, and a gentleman who's still here with us from the national leadership team of Rainbow Push and the NAACP, the senior pastor of the iconic Baltimore Church. Of course, the Douglas Memorial Community Church, Reverend Dr. Todd Urey. Of course, Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, who's going to be in Chicago with us at the Democratic Convention as a delegate. Can't wait. The boy's going to be crazy often. It's going to be off the chain here in Chicago. Who is going to be great? Of course, Dwight McKee, who witnessed and was part of the Civil Rights Movement in 1968 when you had that convention here. And there's so much that he can tell us about what they saw and experienced then. Just having been with Ed Yonka, Operation Breadbasket, having worked with Reverend Jesse Jackson when he was a very young minister, and by extension with Dr. King and Reverend James Bevel and Reverend C.T. Vivian and all of these icons who you saw every day. But we have got this tremendous man who was with us yesterday, my dear friend Ed Yonka, brilliant civil libertarian from the ACLU of Illinois. He's their director of communications. Whenever I need anything from the ACLU, particularly interpretation, I go to the director of public policy and communications. And I'm so glad that you're here with us today, because I wanted to talk with you about something that is concerning. Many people have been wondering how highly charged will the political atmosphere be here in Chicago in August of 2024. I think part of the worry is that as police and Secret Service are canvassing homeowners in the United Center area where they're going to have the convention, and only heaven knows where else they're doing that, and businesses talking about their security plans, really trying to find out who people are. And as we're hearing about these zones, well, you're not going to be able to go protest. And make no mistake, a lot of people are planning to come to Chicago to do just that. They're not telegraphing it, they're talking about it all over media, social media. One has to wonder, of course, you want security at Yonka. You want the police to have your back, you just don't want them on your back, right?
Right.
So what's happening and what happened with the Chicago City Council? Of course, Chicago will be the host city.
Right.
For the Democratic National Convention in August.
Yeah. So, Santita, I mean, first of all, obviously, we live in a time when there are many issues that people want to demonstrate about, be heard about, make sure that delegates at a convention like the one that's being planned in Chicago are aware of and know the position, know the feelings that people have. And so we need to make sure that Chicago is a place where vigorous First Amendment activity is permitted during this convention. A little bit of history, not as far back as 1968, but in 1996, the last time Chicago hosted the DNC, the ACLU actually had to sue the city in the last few weeks before the convention to ensure that there were places that demonstrators could get to close enough to the United Center so that the delegates, the intended target of the speech, would actually be aware, know, see, and hear from people who at that time were protesting for universal health care. As we run up on this convention, and we're just a few months away now, number one, there's very little signs of a plan for how anything in terms of First Amendment activity is going to be allowed and where it's going to be allowed, how it's going to be permitted, what's going to happen with regards to that. All of the people who have sought permits for marches during the time of the debate have been refused already by the city of Chicago. And then today, just a few minutes ago, the Chicago City Council passed an ordinance that creates a, quote, security zone near both the United Center and McCormick Place, where most of the delegates will be staying, where the platform writing activity will be taking place, the policy-making group of the DNC. And they passed these security zones, which say, A, that the security zones will be a place where people can come and gather, but they're prohibited from bringing objects in, although the objects they can bring in, can't bring in, are not really well defined. It is not clear where the zones are going to be. It is not clear when they are going to advertise what the zones are. And one of the most interesting things is the ordinance actually says that the way in which people will be notified about these zones is on the website of the Chicago Police Department. And as you can well imagine, anybody who's coming in from out of town and looking to demonstrate, the first place they're going to go look for their information about where to go is on the website of the Chicago Police Department.
How about that?
Yeah. And so, what we're concerned with is this ought to be in time when the city and the federal authorities and everybody is actually sitting at a table with the people who are want to engage in protest, because it's not simply those sites. As you know, Santita, there are iconic places in Chicago that one wants to be, right? To send a signal to the international media who will gather here that you are in Chicago. People will want to be in Grant Park. People will want to be on Michigan Avenue. People will want to be on Daley Plaza. It is not clear yet whether or not people would be permitted to do any of that. And so again, without a plan, with this vagueness of these areas and these zones, with the idea that the zones may only be revealed on a website that's run by CPD, I think a lot of people have concerns with how people are going to be able to express themselves during the course of the convention.
Well, with all of these iconic sites all over Chicago, it seems that people are being squeezed out of those spaces in Yonka.
That's the concern.
How do you tell the difference between a tourist and someone who's here in Chicago to act out, to attend the convention, even though they're not getting in it, they want to be around. And yes, some of them want to express dissent. Most of them will be here to do just that, but that's their right. It's the political convention, for heaven's sake.
Exactly. And if you think back just a few years ago in Chicago, during the NATO meetings that took place here in 2012, this was a time when there was a plan. The footprint of where the security zones were known fairly far in advance. People were given permits for marches. People were given permits for Daley Plaza. Candidly, the city permitted people to march around the Loop area for most of that weekend. For the folks who were here and remember that time, were permitted to express themselves, to march in groups large and small, and they were, of differing sizes. People gathered for different issues during that period of time. And that kind of vigorous expression, that kind of airing of issues and objections and support for particular positions is exactly the kind of thing we need to be supportive of. But that means that the city government officials and others need to be at a table working towards that, not denying permits and saying that you can't march in certain areas.
Well, increasingly, it seems that, not increasingly, Dr. King was an enemy of the state. We treat people who are anti-slavery, who want women to have the right to vote. People who look, the ACLU was the butt of every joke on All in the Family, which was one of the iconic television shows in the history of American television, certainly of the 70s. That show occupies a particular space in all of Americana. And so does the ACLU. It seems that we're still treating people who want to express themselves, particularly from the left, as the enemy at Yonka.
Well, I can't help but observe, I think, to that point, that, just this week, we've had a United States senator suggest that people ought to physically assault or injure with their car people who are engaged in protest, engaged in civil disobedience, to be sure, but engaged in speaking out and in protest and in demonstration. And some of, I just would note, without making a partisan comment, that's a United States senator that belongs to a political party who thinks that people who engaged in an insurrection are somehow, political prisoners. So, the idea that, we have tagged some people as being dangerous who don't commit acts of violence, but people who do commit acts of violence are somehow being treated as though that didn't happen, or we're trying to, have some sort of collective amnesia. The truth is that, everybody has a right to speak and to demonstrate and to express themselves. And we ought to allow for that, especially during the times of events, like one of the DNC, where you're going to have media and visitors and delegates from all over the country and all over the world come to this city and be part of that activity. We ought to make sure that every voice that wants to be heard at least gets an opportunity.
But do you think that's going to happen? It seems that this is happening. Do you think the city knows what it's dealing with? Because it seems like this is incredibly. There's no coordination here. Like you said, the stockholders, the stakeholders, if you will, should be at the table. Not just the police, but people from different organizations that might be out there. I mean, no one is being called together.
Yeah.
So that
I hope that, the truth is, Santita, I think as we look at it now, that's not happening, and it's very concerning. Look, there's still time, but the time is running short, and they need to move on this. It's also worth noting, just because we're a major international city, that there'll be a host of other activities that will take place this summer that will have, all kinds of needs in places where people want to express themselves, whether it's the Pride Parade or NASCAR being in Chicago or Lollapalooza or a host of other things. I'm told Lollapalooza is a big event. I'm too old now to appreciate that. But, the truth is that there's a lot of things that are going to happen and take up the city's attention. We ought to get this work done now. And so the sooner that begins, the better off we're all going to be.
But, with Lollapalooza and which I barely know something about, and NASCAR, barely know something about that too, and on and on and on, Chicago Fest and all of these tremendous events that we have in Chicago, they're not approached with such trepidation and fear.
I think that's very true. And, that's unfortunate. And again, I think, the symbol that gets sent, or the signal that gets sent by, the first 5 groups that sought permits to march, one seeking to march the day before the convention even began. Another seeking to march, during the course of the convention, during one of the daytimes, like just denying all of those permits, offering no alternatives, not giving people even a chance to negotiate or talk about, a time, a place, and a manner for their demonstration is really unfortunate, and I think sends a signal, as you say, that this is being treated with trepidation because people are trying to express views that may not be ones that people want to hear during the course of the convention.
And, yesterday you were here talking about warrantless surveillance and how that is growing. That's being further codified in America. But now we're also, and this is not for you, it's just an observation that I'm making. The president, because he is being confronted about different policies, particularly Gaza, the White House and his campaign are seeking to have smaller events in a presidential year with fewer people and people they vet. And yet I see some of the most progressive people who say, well, if we have warrantless surveillance, we're going to give Trump these powers. I'm like, everybody stop. This is happening right now. Trump
Well,
is not the president right now. This is happening under a Democratic administration. And I guess my question is for you, what do we do? Because it seems to me that Americans are boxed in.
so I think there are two things that I think we do. The first is I think, as we talked about yesterday with like the warrantless surveillance, is continue to reach out to elected officials and make clear that it's an issue we care about. I
Mhm.
worry sometimes, as we were discussing that yesterday, that in the cacophony of issues, 20 years on from 9/11, where a lot of these powers got expanded, that those issues just get lost. So that's the
Mhm.
first one. But the second part of it is that I think we really have to send signals and show up and support demonstrators and speak out to elected officials about the importance of a vigorous First Amendment activities. I sometimes, just sit back with amazement and look. We, on the one hand, complain that people don't care and they don't do anything. And then we complain when they go out in the streets and march because they found an issue they care so much about. And so I think we need to help with that narrative shift of looking at the idea of dissent and protest. You made this observation yesterday. This idea of dissent and protest isn't something to be feared. It's actually something to be embraced as, an American value. And I don't think we should depend on just the elected officials doing that.
Mhm.
Frankly, we ought to do it. When we see people who are engaged in trying to tamp that expression down or trying to critique or criticize that expression, we ought to speak out. You see somebody say that in a public forum or in a place in the newspaper, write a letter to the editor, speak out, call a radio station, do something like that. I think these are things that all of us can help in terms of changing those narratives around the issues.
Where do you see this going the closer we get to the Democratic convention? Do you see this becoming more specific? Do you see uh, that there will be fewer and fewer places for people to gather?
What I fear will happen, and what we're already hearing, and I think it's going to happen, is I think we're going to see litigation. I think we're going to see a lot of this stuff ultimately be forced to negotiation, but only through the courts. Not because it's the right thing to do, but only because a federal court steps in and forces, be it the city or the federal government or others, to engage in the conversation. We ought to just skip that step and save the time and the expense for everybody and just do that work up front.
Hmm. Ed Yonker from the ACLU of Illinois, um, Director of Communications and Public Policy. Is there anything that's been left unsaid today? What do you
I,
want
I,
to think about?
I don't think so. Again, there's nobody who likes the sound of their own voice more than I do, but I'm just not sure I've left anything unsaid.
No, I love the sound of your voice. It's a magnificent voice. Come on now. I love it. But I thank you. I thank you
Thank
really
you.
for helping us to understand what's going on, because that happened in Chicago today. And this is what I think we need to be opening our eyes and paying attention to what is heading our way in August, because at Yonka, people are just going to come to Chicago. And the last place they're going to go, the last place they're going to try and find information, Reverend Dr. Yuri, Dwight McKee, and Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, is the Chicago Police Department. You're not going to go on that website. Tell me where to go, please. Please tell me. That's not going to work. Ed Yonka, ACLU of Illinois, sending you so much love.
Thank you.
Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, see what you're coming into?
Yeah, I see. I hear. I think
What
I
does that
appreciate.
sound like to you? I mean,
Well,
which is just, would you go to the Chicago Police Department website to find out where you can go?
HE double hockey sticks. No.
No, not you, Ron.
Yeah.
What?
No. The
Oh,
answer is unequivocally no. I think that Ed was spot on, and I thank you, Santita, for bringing this to the public light. We don't often have to agree on all the issues, but one of the fundamental principles that we should believe in our democracy, not a dictatorship, authoritarian, or a other form of oppression in other countries, but America is the right to march and protest is as fundamental as apple pie. And I'm reminded of something Dr. King said. I want to say real quick, where he had a great quote on, he said, somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for right. He had another quote where he said, every man of humane convictions must decide on the protest that best suits his convictions, but we must all protest. So we have gained so many rights because of the ability to raise awareness, to protest. It's an act of civil disobedience. It's an act of showing our disapproval for something. And I believe that these people should have their First Amendment right that should not be curtailed. Even if Biden doesn't agree with it, even if it causes somewhat of a spectacle or whatever for him at his DNC convention, this is their right.
But wait a minute, Ron. It's not his convention.
Well, I mean,
no. I'm just saying. I think
right.
That's part of the mistake they're making.
Well,
it's
ours. No. Yeah, I agree with you.
Know what I mean?
I use
no. But
language.
when you know this better than
you're
anyone.
right. Yes.
When you're in
it's
the
room, public. It's the
people,
and
they're talking about this. They reference this, and it happens with every nominee.
Correct.
This is his convention.
Correct.
Praise the Lord. We will have a woman.
Correct.
But they always say, it's his.
Well, I'm glad you corrected me. You're absolutely right. But the point I'm making is these people have a right to do that, whether he agrees or disagrees. This is a public space. People have the right to dissent and air their grievances and to raise awareness for the issues that they disagree with. Now, my recommendation personally would be that the president and those that are operating within these spaces do more outreach to listen to these groups. There's still damage control and mitigation that can happen, but it seems like they're turning a tone deaf ear. But that would be my suggestion. But to try to silence them, I think it's the wrong approach. I think as long as it's peaceful, there's no violence, there's nobody threatening to harm anybody, these people should be able to do that just like anybody else would. Just like when we were at the George Floyd, when we were protesting with Black Lives Matter in the streets for police accountability and criminal justice reforms, these people have the same rights. And I want to see them be able to exercise their First Amendment constitutional right of free speech and assembly. So yes, I don't think we should silence them. I think we should hear them. They shouldn't try to put roadblocks and impediments to make it more difficult or damn near impossible for them to be able to do this. So I think Ed was spot on. I hope that they will win legal challenges, but it's a shame that they have to go through all these hoops and barriers to do what our Constitution provides.
Well, it is. I wonder how people are going to react, Representative, when they find out that they can't go here, they can't go there. It's just, I don't see that ending well. Dwight McKee. Oh, no. State Representative Reynolds. Well, I mean, you tell me.
I was just going to say, I expect this out of Trump, where he tries to silence his dissenters. I expect this out of MAGA, right? Where they want to, silence people and they want to, oppress people when they want to freely speak. I expect this from dictators that censor, like Putin, like he does with his state-controlled media, and he
we
kills.
Got state-controlled media, Ron.
Well, you know what I mean. They
No.
Yeah,
I'm telling you.
Right. Well, we're able to do this right now, right? We're able to have this podcast.
Yeah, but this is independent.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
The fact is, you cannot really be. I've had more space on right-wing media than I did with the so-called Democratic-leaning media, because unless I was willing to give up Democratic talking points, I would not get called, and I was not welcome.
Got it. So you're educating us. I didn't know that.
No, that's why I'm letting you know.
Yeah, thank you.
We ain't got that space.
Okay. Yeah.
So
well, you're an expert. I trust your judgment.
No, I mean it's just my experience,
right.
And I'm just saying to you the authoritarianism is already here. People keep waiting. They're like, this is happening under the Biden administration. This is, I mean, this ain't Trump.
Well, we have to speak out against it. We just like I would be the first with a microphone speaking out if it was, MAGA. I'm gonna speak out the same because I'm not
MAGA, AGA, GAGA.
Yeah, I believe in calling balls and strikes, and sometimes we have to hold our own accountable and not just, well, it's okay because it's our team. No, I don't care what jersey they have on. Right is right and wrong is wrong, and I don't stand for this. I think these people should have that right. They should not be trying to prohibit them from protesting and marching because they don't agree with the message.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Dwight McKee, your thoughts. What do you think about the Secret Service? Well, I live with the Secret Service, so I get it. They're going around, but they're going around now. Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds and Reverend Dr. Talieri, Dwight, they're going from house to house. They're going to the businesses. They want to know what your thoughts are. What are you going to do? Wubba, wubba, wubba. Now, I mean, there are fewer and fewer spaces in Chicago, a great tourist town where people are going to be able to gather and express their opinions. And how are they going to be able to distinguish between the people who weigh in on any given subject and people who are here to protest? I mean, how's that going to work? Dwight?
You got a question in that?
Yeah. I mean,
what is your question?
What's this going to look like? You lived through 1968.
Well, first you have to understand that they expect chaos. But that's why they put black women in charge. Whenever they have some untenable situation, they put black women and black men in charge.
I said black men too.
Yeah, I said black women and black men in charge is so that they can take the hit. So they're expecting chaos because Mignon and them are trying to run this joint. And so it's going to be untenable and unmanageable.
Why do you say that with such certainty?
Because I was here in 68. And 68 was a microscopic version of what you're going to see this time around.
Microscopic?
Yeah, because in 68, what you didn't have was social media. And so you didn't have the capacity to manage crowds in seconds and minutes, where you can send out a beep and tell a crowd to meet you on this corner at this time. And the police are helpless to stop that. One of the things that you saw the police struggling with yesterday, the day before yesterday, is that they really didn't know where the protesters was going to show up. So they was always on the defensive. By the time they got there, the protesters had already set themselves up.
You mean locking up the bridges and the highways and all of that throughout the United States?
That's right. They were helpless to stop that because they didn't know where that was going. In this situation, you're going to have thousands of people coming in. Many of the people who you saw protesting around the country yesterday are going to show up here. This is going to be the function at the junction. And so all of the protesters, not just for Gaza, but for all of the issues that people want front and center, they're going to show up. Some are showing up because they're professional protesters, and they're going to show up to disrupt. You're going to have a lot of these young people who are not protesting out of some issue, but they're just looking for chaos because it's fun for them. Mm-hmm. And so, they, even today, you will see hundreds of them go down to Grant Park and close down Grant Park on a humbug. I mean, you're looking at a chaotic situation, but the variable in it all is how the Chicago police is going to respond. The Chicago police, almost by its nature, by reflex, are oppressive. And what the conclusion was in 68 is not that the protesters were rioting, it was a police riot. That's what the report called it, a police riot. And now you have the children and the nephews of those same police, many of them who've never been in a situation before, trying to manage a crowd which is virtually going to be unmanageable. And so you will see many of them out of control. Again, unlike 68, though, you're going to see a response from a lot of these young people because many of them don't come out of Dr. King's movement. They come out of a protest movement, but they don't come out of a Dr. King movement. And so they don't believe inherently in nonviolent resistance. Some of them will fight back. And so I just see, organized chaos on all sides. And I think the biggest victims of it is going to be the Democratic Party, because you would not be able to tell the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans when it comes to repression. The whole theme of the convention is going to be, we need to preserve democracy. Well, what you're going to do, what you're going to find out is Daley's famous statement is the role of the police is not to prevent chaos, it's to preserve chaos. And so when you see the Democrats and Biden in that crowd overreacting, it is going to shine a light on the fact that this crowd is not that much different than Trump.
Do you think that why do you say that? Because do you think there's a predisposition? I mean, just given that, if you just look at the whites, as I mentioned previously, how the Biden re-election campaign is handling their rallies.
No, I think is that it's the Democratic convention, but most of the police in Chicago are MAGA police.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are already predisposed to a certain level of violence based on their culture. Most of the police here, I bet you a dime to a biscuit, are voting for Trump. They have a Trump mentality. And so they're going to respond in a very oppressive, very hostile manner. But who's going to seem to be responsible for it is going to be the Democrats in Biden, because it's their convention. And that's what they purport to protect.
Reverend Dr. Uri, what do you make of these protest zones? What do you make of it seems that increasingly, number one, it seems like we're being slow walked, or maybe the city's trying to figure it out. The city and the Democratic National Committee, and maybe the intelligence agencies and everybody else, because everybody will be here because, of course, the president and the vice president and other people of tremendous consequence in our government and internationally will be here. I do remember the NATO meeting here more than 10 years ago. And it was a different atmosphere, but you still felt there were places that you could not go. But the atmosphere then was not nearly as charged politically as it is now. It was a different day. It was a different day. These kids you're protesting now were children then. They were babies. Now they even protest differently, Reverend Dr. Uri. They don't let you know that they're coming, Representative Reynolds and Dwight McKee. They're off the grid. And then they show up by the hundreds and the thousands. It's just, because they're like, I see you, I know you, I got something for you. Reverend Dr. Uri.
So a couple of things about words, right? When we say police actually speaks to the authority that is leveraged. It's the police powers of the state. Police officers and departments are paramilitary units. They are the domestic army on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
They have military weaponry. They have almost unchecked authority in many instances, except for there being some carve outs. As Representative Ron Reynolds will know, being in Texas, the notion of the state, as in the state of Texas, state of Illinois, as a sovereign, gets to determine when it waives immunity from suit. So if something goes wrong, if the sovereign state of Illinois chooses not to waive, or is established in statute that it does not waive its immunity for claims of injury that's done in the usual manner of business, what they're in business to do, then what you basically now have to kind of assess and calculate is how do you keep an already volatile situation from getting out of control? It is part and parcel a replay of what was Lyndon Johnson's concerns after the summers of 64, 5, 6, 7, when he decided to do the President's Commission on Civil Disturbances, better known as the Kerner Commission, to try to figure out, in the words of our uh, political strategist and cultural theologian Marvin Gaye, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be the question that's going to play out on live news feeds going across the world. Some of them not controlled by any particular corporate interest. It's going to be a lot of independent, individual tracking of it. And what I will tell you, to an important point of Dwight's that he made, is not only do you need to keep an eye on what's happening with the police, you also have to keep an eye on the insurrectionists who will exploit the volatility of the crowd to create exactly the kind of issue that allows the police to use lethal force unchecked and without any recompense. So part of the strategy has to be, how do we comport ourselves to be able to make sure that we protest and are heard without giving false justification for these things to happen. And I'll give you a recent case in point. When I was kind of embedded with the mayor of Louisville's staff and team after Reverend Jackson and I, and now Congressman Jackson, went to Louisville after Breonna Taylor's death really became public, nationally public, after George Floyd was killed. What you recognize is that on the day that Daniel Cameron was issuing his decision not to prosecute the police officers.
Now, who was Daniel Cameron?
Daniel Cameron is the Kentucky Attorney General who had taken the authority to determine whether or not criminal charges would be levied because the local prosecutor, well, actually, he took the authority from the local prosecutor as a way to kind of manipulate the outcome.
And he's
But the
the Black
case,
Republican who just unsuccessfully ran for governor, yes?
he did just lose to Governor Andy Bashir, who's now going into his second term and is looked upon as one to watch in the 2028 race, because it is a rarity to have a Democratic governor get 2 successive terms in a state that typically votes very much red. And the margin this time was much larger than the margin, I think, of about 500 or so votes the first time. That being said, on the day, part of my job or responsibility was to monitor who's monitoring. So from a command center, being able to see what the police are looking at in terms of cameras across the city, watching how the FBI is interfacing with local police, making sure that the rights of persons are not infringed upon as they are free now to express their dissatisfaction with the decision that had come down. You begin to kind of watch how things flow. Now, here's what the rule says: you cannot stifle speech. You can control time, place, and manner. What that simply means is these zones they're using under the basis of we do have the right to determine not if you speak, but where you speak. Conversation we had in the first hour. It's the political side of what we see in the USC case with its valedictorian. When they come with this now, you have to recognize two things. Saw it in Baltimore after um,
Freddie Gray.
Freddie Gray, and more recently with other issues where you had the police pushback after George Floyd protests here um, uh, were renewed in that time, and there were literally. I was in the crowd amongst the people, monitoring to make sure people could be heard. I actually spent a lot of time asking folks that I knew I didn't recognize from any part of the city, where are you from? What are you here to do? Because a lot of what was done to generate a police response was done by outsiders who had infiltrated for the purposes of creating just that kind of chaos. And so you have to be careful. You got to watch both sides. You got to know who you know and identify who you don't know and be able to kind of keep an eye on them, because sometimes the them are actually the folks who are also in uniform that are showing up to be um, a blended form of them to keep an eye on you. So when we're looking at this, it's not just the objective of being able to get the message out, it's understanding the mechanisms by which state power to not only take your liberty, but to take your life can be put into practice without any accountability whatever, and making sure that you not only have connections with the organizations, but you have lawyers who are making sure that there's accountability, ready to intervene if it's necessary to get court action. And quite honestly, the way you do in some instances is depending on how you work out the details. If you're not going to be able to move these protest zones, you need to have some conversation so that the police know who's a friendly and who ain't in terms of the protesters.
Well, I mean,
So,
Dwight. Oh no, please talk to me. Yes.
no. I mean that's kind of the long and the short of it. Is that the objective is to make sure that in the process of addressing the opportunity to be heard within a time of a venue, convention's going to start on one day, it's going to end on another day. So you can expect that's when the protest is going to take place. Not a whole lot necessarily, maybe a day or so before, nothing the day after, because won't nobody be there. And so what you now have to do is really just have a plan and make sure that your plan includes to self-protect, not only from the obvious offender and the subtle infiltrator, but also folks who are outsiders, literally, who will come in and set up and do exactly what they need to do to try to create the kind of chaos that then makes you the scapegoat for the lethal force that will be used to your own detriment and to the discrediting of the message you're trying to get out.
But you make me think of something, and I want to toss this to you, Dwight. Do you think this? It seems like there's an incredible amount of energy, Reverend Dr. Urey, that and Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds. There is a lot of energy out here. You just feel it. Do you think it'll be confined to the convention, Dwight?
Well, no, of course not. I think it may start with them at the city council. The protest may start with people going down
In Chicago
now, trying to set up this scheme for internal management. I'm not sure that the convention just may not be a roundup, maybe a roundup to a precursor to what's going on then. The other group you have to watch out for, and I don't think that it's been factored in, is going to be the pro-Israeli crowd that's going to come in and protest. They're going to protest in behalf of Israel and what's happening in Gaza. And that's going to also create some potential confrontation between them and the anti-genocide group. And so I just don't think it's manageable. And I think that again, who's going to take full advantage of it is Trump, because he will learn. He will play it like a fiddle. However the Democrats are reacting and responding to this, he's going to use his political advantage to demean the Democrats and to demean Biden. And so, uh, just like 1968, I think that the Democratic Party is going to pay a profound price for this. And it took them years to survive it. And Johnson didn't survive it. Nixon became the president, and it took them years to
And it
get
took a
past what happened.
and it took a scandal for Nixon to be taken out, because conceivably, I guess he could have gone on, right?
Absolutely.
Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, you're an elected official. You work with the police and these officials all the time. What do you recommend be done here in Chicago? Because you'll be a delegate, but you also want to be out amongst the people. We've talked about that.
Yeah, I think that the police should operate within the normal course of business. They shouldn't, besides making sure there's ample police presence for public safety and to keep efficiency when it comes to traffic flow. I think that they should operate from a standpoint of as normal of a course of business as possible. I think that the more that they deviate from their standard practice of allowing access, I think the more it shows that they are blocking the free flow of the ability of the citizens to protest. And I think that if I was the leadership in Chicago, the mayor and the police chief, I would be working and doing what's in the best interest of the public to allow them to freely assemble, but keeping it safe and manageable so that it doesn't impede upon traffic and public safety. But by no means should there be an attempt to stifle free speech and assembly. I think that Reverend Uri articulated the standards very well, and I don't think they should deviate from that. To do that is to show that you're intentionally trying to suppress the free flow of information or dissent. They are trying to operate from a standpoint of disenfranchising the will of people who want to make their voices heard, and they're trying to silence people. Mm-hmm. And I think that is unpatriotic. I think that is un-American, and they're putting their thumb on the scale. And the police shouldn't be there. That's not their role to say, okay, well, we're gonna disallow this because it doesn't go along with our guys' message. And so I think that they should do whatever they do. If it wasn't the DNC, if it wasn't Biden, they should operate from a standpoint of fairness, from a standpoint of protocol, whatever those protocols were. They shouldn't deviate from that, other than a large scale event where you want to make sure that they scale up from a public safety and transportation standpoint, so that the regular businesses aren't losing business because they can't get their customers there. They need to do the right thing for all the stakeholders, and that includes the people who want to protest. I think that's what they should be doing, and I think they should be doing it from a standpoint of fairness, from a standpoint of whether or not these were supporters of the DNC, that they should be treated just as fairly and just as equally. That's what they should be doing, in my opinion.
Reverend Dr. Uri, I've got a couple of minutes here. What do you foresee?
What do I see?
No, what do you foresee in your comment?
Well, remember that the role of the police is to control chaos. And I go back to my early days of being in the military when I was part of the Georgia National Guard. And very often we would have what we call civil disturbance training.
Mm.
You're not trying to eliminate the civil disturbance. You're trying to control the response and the reaction and the impact of a civil disturbance should it arise. If you have an issue that is now escalating, and you go from, and I wouldn't be surprised that the closer you get to the convention and the concerns and the stretched resources of the city of Chicago, that you will not probably see Governor Pritzker put the National Guard on alert. And they're going to be ready to deploy at the first call from someone at the DNC to the mayor or to the governor to say, we need the National Guard. Now that then changes. Now you then have paramilitary and military in the same space. And we've seen incidents that have gotten out of control where you now have folks who have a right to conceal carry in the state of Illinois, who will be on the streets with handguns, on the street with weapons, doing what they do. And there's going to be something that's going to, in Dwight's words, cause something to pop right off. And at that point, forget what's happening inside the convention. The rest of the news is going to be on everything happening outside the convention, at which point you have now you've crossed over the Rubicon, and trouble is at your doorstep.
Hey,
Dwight McKee, the final.
Santita,
Okay, yes.
can I say something really quick?
Yes.
What they're trying to do is control the imagery and the narrative. They don't want a split screen of, Biden and DNC folks talking, and then a split screen of protesters out in the streets. That's what they're trying to do, and I think that is certainly wrong. I understand, but I don't agree with it. So that's what they're trying to avoid. They're trying to avoid a PR nightmare from a standpoint of messaging. They want the message to be certainly just on the convention on the inside, not what's happening on the outside. So we know what they're trying to do. I just don't think it's right. That's all. I just wanted to get that out, to be crystal clear on what they're trying to avoid from happening.
Dwight, 1 minute. Your closing thought?
Well, I think Yuri pretty much covered my thoughts. Is that you're looking at military, you're looking at paramilitary, you're looking at protesters, you're looking at anti-protesters. And then the other variable in this, because this is Chicago, is who else is going to take full advantage of it are the looters, those who are the groups that go and crash their cars through these stores and steal all the merchandise. They're going to take full advantage of it because the police are going to be preoccupied with all of these marches and protesters, and they're going to see open season. And you will see them marauder. Right now they're doing 8, 9, 10 of these crashes a night sometime, where you'll see them in spades because they know they have no opposition to that. So, as I said the other day, welcome to the sideshow. Or it's going to be hurry,
Step right on in.
Step right on in.
Can't afford to pass us by.
Or
Guaranteed
to make you cry. It's going to be that kind of party.
Boy, am I glad you all were my babysitters. All those songs that they were dancing with their boyfriends and girlfriends to, and now they're embedded in my brain. And there's that.
Sounds just like the circus is coming to town.
Well, I am afraid that is what it's looking like.
Let the sideshow begin. Hurry right on in.
Hurry. Everybody, I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Texas State Representative Ron Williams, welcome to Chicago. Dwight McKee, Reverend Dr. Todd Geary.
All right, Toddy.
This is America 2024. God bless you, everybody. Stay tuned for the rest of this wonderful lineup on AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Sending you all so much love. God bless.